Before I get started, I need to say this has a very high trigger warning content. With that being said, this is diary entry number 11. The title is When Nobody Came. These are moments in life that change the way you see the world forever. For me, one of those moments wasn't the first time I was hit. It wasn't the first time I was threatened. It wasn't even the first time I was terrified. It was the moment I realized that people could hear what was happening and still choose to do nothing. This chapter is called When Nobody Came. Not because nobody knew, not because nobody heard, but because nobody came. When we finally arrived to number one's uncle's house, I thought things were already as bad as they could get. I was wrong. His uncle was sitting on the couch smoking weed. I thought to myself, oh great, now I'm going to have to live with another man who gives off weird vibes and sits there high all day long. Not only that, but the house was completely disgusting. There was dust, mold, rat and mouse droppings, and to be real, dead mice and rat bodies where they kicked the bucket. It looked like a hoarder house. My belongings were placed in the garage out in the elements. I had no idea that my life was about to get even worse. I didn't have a job, and my boyfriend always had my car. Even on the very first night there, he left me alone with his uncle. Somebody I didn't know. The same man who had been sitting on the couch high. And, to make matters worse, he didn't come back until the next morning. I barely slept. I had to sleep on the couch while his uncle slept on the other one. For some reason, he didn't sleep in his own bed. It was weird. I was very terrified. I texted my boyfriend about it, but the more I did, the angrier he got. Eventually he said, if you keep on, I'm not coming back. I'll just leave you there. All I could think of was, that's my car. So I better stop texting. By the second or third month, things got even worse. I wanted to use my car to go look for a job so I could support myself. I had finally cleaned out one of the spare bedrooms and the big den area because I couldn't stand the clutter and filth. We finally had our own room in the house after I cleaned it out, but his uncle would stand at the door and stare in through a crack. I caught him multiple times masturbating at my door. Again, I was terrified. I started hiding in the corners of the room where he couldn't see me when I was there alone. One day, I couldn't take it anymore. I wanted to take my car and leave. I didn't even know where I was, but I was determined to rescue myself. I was going to drive until I saw a city, because where I was, it was in the deep country. My boyfriend said, you didn't put gas in this car. I'm going somewhere. You're not. I looked at him and I was like, it's my car. I thought I had the right to it. My ex-husband even paid for that car more than once, even taking a title loan out on his own vehicle. What happened next will forever change me inside. That was the worst beating I had ever received. Worse even than when he threw me down the stairs at our last apartment. I tried to get out of the car because he pretended to agree to take me wherever I wanted to go. But I told him I was going to drive. So when he got in, he opened the passenger door. I thought he was about to get in. But no, instead, he grabbed me by my hair, dragged me across the front seat, all the way to the passenger side. Then he beat me mercilessly. He broke my nose that day. I screamed at the top of my lungs. Because we were outside, I hoped anyone would hear me, but no one came. A few hours later, his uncle casually looked at me and said, "That's what you get. Women should never try to stand up to their man. If you act like that, you deserve to get manhandled." I knew I wasn't safe. I had a broken nose, but it wouldn't be my last. My boyfriend eventually disappeared again, but this time for a couple of weeks. I hid inside the house because I didn't trust his uncle. The uncle had druggy friends who also started hanging around. They were really rough types, and some who had criminal records that literally just got out of prison. I took Puppy and went into the deep woods. I had found a tent while cleaning, so I went out there where nobody knew I was there. I know how to forage for mushrooms. There was also a huge blackberry vine as well. I would sneak back to the house during the day and get cans of beans to eat. I learned how to use a rock to cook on. I can also start a fire without matches. Eventually, my boyfriend came back and acted again like nothing had happened. But those new people, they started stealing my belongings. Everything that I hadn't already been forced to pawn for drug money. Sure, there were a few good days. I remember a bonfire we had. But most of the time, I lived on the edge. Every time he got high, he would force himself on me, even when I said no. Eventually, I became pregnant. I hadn't had a period for a very long time. It was at least 2, 3, maybe 4 months. But before I could tell him, he looked at me and said, "You sure are moodier and hungrier. Are you pregnant?" And I said, "Yeah, pretty sure I am." At first he seemed to be happy. He told everyone I was carrying his baby. But he wouldn't take me to the doctor. That cost money. A few weeks later, I said something that set him off. He beat me and held me up against the wall and choked me out until I passed out. I woke up in a different room, not knowing how I got there, and he was still over top of me, kicking in my stomach. His eyes were very dark, like he wasn't even present in that moment. It was like he was in some sort of trance. I wanted to go to the hospital, but he told me no. He told me they'd arrest him and I'd be stuck, and that there was no help coming for me. He also told me that if I tried to help myself, that would be a very bad thing. I later miscarried. Strangulation doesn't end when they let go. There is something I need to talk about here because I didn't understand it at the time. When number one choked me until I lost consciousness, I thought it was just another assault. I thought if there were no broken bones and no obvious injuries, then eventually I would recover. What I didn't know is that strangulation can cause injuries that aren't visible. Years later, while trying to escape my second abuser, I called the domestic violence shelter for women. During one of those conversations, the case manager explained the strangulation trauma to me. I was so shocked. For the first time, pieces of my health puzzle started making sense. I learned when someone places pressure on your neck, they can cut off oxygen to your brain. They can damage blood vessels, nerves, your airway, even parts of your nervous system. A person can survive strangulation and still have long-term symptoms years later. Looking back, I realized I had all of those symptoms. Memory problems, difficulty concentrating, brain fog, really bad migraines like 90% of my days, dizziness, balance issues, neck pain, problems with my anxiety and panic, sleep disturbances like nightmares and night terrors, hypervigilance, choking or coughing randomly while talking, sleeping, or just breathing, a nervous system that seemed to be stuck in survival mode. I blamed myself for years. I thought maybe I wasn't trying hard enough. Maybe I was weak. Maybe I'm just broken. But learning about the strangulation trauma helped me understand that what happened to me was physical as well as emotional. My body wasn't reacting to nothing. My brain had severe repeated trauma. And now, years later, I'm still dealing with most of the effects. I still scan rooms when I enter them. I startle easily. I struggle with chronic pain, headaches, and autonomic nervous system dysfunction. I still have moments where my body reacts as though danger is present even when I'm safe. For a long time, I thought those reactions were just character flaws. Now I understand they are survival responses. The truth is that strangulation is one of the most dangerous forms of domestic violence. Many survivors don't realize how serious it is because bruises aren't always visible. I didn't know. No one told me. And because no one told me, I spent years wondering why I felt so different after those assaults. Today I know better. My body remembers what happens even when I wish it didn't. And if you're listening to this and you've experienced strangulation trauma, please take it seriously. Even if it happened years ago, even if you think you're fine, the injuries aren't always visible and the effects can last much longer than people realize. I survived it. But surviving and recovering from it have been two very difficult journeys. Looking back now, I realize this chapter wasn't only about abuse. It was about isolation. It wasn't about what happens when a victim is surrounded by people, but has no one standing beside them. The uncle knew. The people coming in and out of the house knew something wasn't right. People heard me scream. People saw the bruises. People saw the fear. But nobody came. For years, I carried shame about that. I wonder if maybe I hadn't screamed loud enough. Maybe I hadn't asked the right people for help clearly enough. Maybe somehow it was my fault. Today I know better. The responsibility never belonged to me. The responsibility belonged to the people who saw what was happening and chose silence. This chapter ends with a miscarriage. It ends with strangulation. It ends with a broken version of me trying to survive another day. But this isn't the end of my story. Because even when nobody came, I was still here. And somehow, despite everything that happened in that house, I survived. And that's where we'll pick up next week, in the next diary entry. I'm a soft-spoken survivor. And you have listened to a Nervous System Diary.